It is our great honor to have Ms. Nancy Gillis, Senior Director, Industrial Decarbonization, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, to deliver her keynote speech and set the scene for today's conference. Ms. Gillis, please.
Great. Thank you very much. Good morning and a welcome to all who are joining us today. I am, as it says, Nancy Gillis. I'm with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And if you see up here, you see some of my background. But what's missing on there is the fact that I started my career in biodiversity. I was with the Nature Conservancy. Some of you may know this organization, who really works very stringently on trying to make sure that we keep the nature that we have currently with us for long term. So it was a pleasure actually to be asked to talk this morning about the intersection between nature and decarbonization. Why? Because as I said, I started my career in nature. I currently work as the Senior Director for Industrial Decarbonization. Now, some of you may not know the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing as an example of the importance. So let me just explain. We are a nonprofit. Next year, we will be celebrating our 30th anniversary, which is very exciting. And we are actually made up of more than 250 companies. They come from across the globe, from all different sectors, and they are joined by one commitment, which is to operationalize sustainability. And operationalizing, putting sustainability in the heart of all of your functions, is actually the only way that we will achieve some of the goals that we've set for ourselves. So one of the things that I want to remind us is the impact that industry has in the world of climate, the impact that we have from greenhouse gases. So my job over at WBCSD is to actually work with the companies who are part of 4 of the 5 sectors you see noted here. I work with buildings, transport, industry, and electricity. In fact, it's great to see some of those organizations who are sponsors, because some of them are also members of WBCSD. So can't help but give a thank you to Swire, to Shell, and also, of course, CLP as well. So you already see that there's a commitment in joining the organization I represent. And that commitment is important because just those 4 sectors of the 5 you see here are responsible for approximately 80% of greenhouse gases globally. If they're the ones who are part of the challenge, they have to be part of the solution. But we don't focus on decarbonization absent nature positivity and social equity. Why? Because that's not a sustainable or long-term approach to solution. So we are just as interested in nature and the interlinkages between climate and nature. And so what are some of those interlinkages? Well, Kevin had mentioned they're very evident. The first, of course, is nature plays a fundamental role in actually pulling out some of the greenhouse gases we have already emitted into the atmosphere. Nature also plays an incredibly important role in resiliency as we feel the impacts of climate change already. Nature is also, and I like to say, one of the great innovation hotbeds. Just ask any of the global pharmaceutical companies as they track back where a lot of their therapeutic medicines come from. It started with nature. We need nature. Climate's impact on nature is also very challenging. When climate and climate change impacts nature, we see the increase of personal impact, health considerations, respiratory challenges, cardiovascular challenges. an increase in insect-borne diseases. We also see economic impacts. Coral bleaching alone will negatively impact millions of individuals who depend on the oceans for not only fish and their individual livelihoods, but also for the wonderful, Hong Kong's part of this, tourism draw that it provides. So it's individual, it's economic, it's also something that I focus a lot on. It's a business impact. Why? Because climate's impact on nature impacts supply chains. Now, you probably hear my English and you think, American. You'd be a little wrong. Ich bin eigentlich Deutsch. I'm actually a German. And so when you think about nature, what we think about in Germany is the levels of the Rhine, the river, and the fact that as it reduces, goods and services do not flow. This impact of nature and climate on nature has a very considerable impact on how businesses are run, our expectations, right? So the interlinkage between climate and nature is very clear. But what's been interesting is that, as Kevin mentioned as well, we've had a very siloed approach to both. It was just this year, for those who are returning from Baku, who also had the opportunity to go to the COP that was biodiversity focused. Just by happenstance, the two COPs were close together. And so we saw each other at both. And we thought, wow. And so conversations that started as one continued at the other. And all of a sudden we realized we should be having this together all the time, because you really can't explore one conversation about addressing climate change without also talking about nature. And I think one of the reasons that I feel nature is so important is when you think about what our goals are for nature versus our goals for climate. So when we talk about climate change, our goal for climate is that we want to keep on a 1.5 degree trajectory. What does that mean? It means that we acknowledge we've already put greenhouse gases beyond a baseline that we want, and we don't want to put any more out. So we want to stop doing something that we're doing and just keep it to where it is right now. Nature and nature positivity, this is a different goal. It's not only to stop the impact on nature, it's actually to reverse it, to actually go back to a baseline of 2020. I think there's a recognition in the differences between those two goals on how essential nature is to us as humans. And so, to me, I hope that we see more of that integration of the conversation. Now, I mentioned I come from the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, and we also are now focused on interlinkages. Now, my background, I did say I started in biodiversity, but one of the things that I'm actually known for is I'm a system modeler, right? So I think about systems, and that's important when we talk about this. I'm also a person who really likes procurement and contract clauses, which makes me a very boring person at cocktail parties, which I never get invited to, but we don't have to talk about that. What we do need to talk about is systems and system approaches. Now, right now, we're talking about the system of climate, the system of nature, the idea that we want to create interlinkages, acknowledge those interlinkages between the two. What we're focused on at WBCSD is a different approach. We're focused on looking at sectors. As I mentioned, for climate, when you think about built environment, energy and transport and mobility, those three sectors, we're talking the 80% of greenhouse gas impact. And those sectors have interlinkages. You can't have an efficient built environment absent access to renewable energy. You can't bring down the greenhouse gas impact of transport absent electrification, which requires built environment. When you start talking about solutions at scale, you are naturally talking about the interlinkages between those three sectors. And so we're doing an approach of bringing those three sectors together to try to create industrial decarbonization at scale. And I'm excited that we're also looking at the impact of climate and nature together. But I must admit, we're also looking at one other very important factor that I hope comes up today and may be a focus of this discussion next year, which is circularity. Circularity is another overlay that is essential. Why? Because in looking at circularity, you're stopping the draw on virgin resources, which in and of itself has a tremendously positive nature impact. And if you're doing it using the correct technologies and energy efficient, it also has a significant reduction in greenhouse gases as well. So we're looking at bringing together the three sectors, having those sectors address decarbonization, but from a lens of both nature positivity, circularity as well. And then we're doing it with something that I am personally interested in, which is making the business case. Why? Because if we don't make the business case, we can have all the personal commitment we want to have, but we won't be able to take action, right? Businesses need to make the case for themselves, and that's not a bad thing. We rely on businesses for the quality of life, the goods and services that make our lives what we want it to be. So we need to have businesses who are part of this journey, but they need to have a business case for it. And one of the important aspects of a business case is something simply called demand. Just you as an individual, if somebody is willing to buy it from you, it's much easier for you to make the case as to why you should put that product and services out there, right? If there's a customer, the supplier will come. Just telling the supplier, you should do this, without having the demand is something we've been trying to do for several decades. Hasn't worked very well. So another thing that we're doing is we're launching something called the Center for Decarbonization Demand Acceleration. And that seeks to do the thing that we all need, which is create demand stimulus for the products and services that are credibly net or near zero, right? And this includes the built environment as well. And I'm excited about this. And for those of you who also secretly, when you go back home, think about contract clauses and offtake agreements, find me. We'll talk about it over coffee. But in closing, what's really necessary to have this kind of interlinkage approach? What's necessary to bring three sectors together? What's necessary to really make the business case, where the business case is both the business, the customer, and the supply chain, the value chain, the whole ecosystem, public-private partnerships? It's something that we believe in, which is called radical collaboration. Why is it radical? Because you need to bring together around a table players you normally don't see. Absent bringing together those players, we won't be having the necessary conversations to really accelerate the impact that we want. So one of the radical collaborations is what's happening here today. It's bringing those who are interested in climate together with those who are interested in nature. It's bringing both public sector together with private sector, right? It's that type of collaboration that will allow us to achieve the goals that we've set for ourselves. So it's a great honor to be with you here today. I very much appreciate this opportunity, and thank you for giving me the time and attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Would you please remain on stage first? Yes, I think Ms. Gillis has really shed lights on how companies they can operationalize decarbonization and tackle the climate risk. Nature is really important to us, and it is really a valuable asset. And it is not only about business, but also our responsibility to preserve it. Now, may I invite BEC Chairman, Mr. Kevin O'Brien, and CEO, Mr. Simon Ng, to come to the stage for the group photo, please. So thank you all. Please take your seats.